Russia announces a ceasefire to allow civilians to safely evacuate the towns of Mariupol and Volnovakha in the Donbass region. Venezuela commemorates the 9th anniversary of the passing of Commander Hugo Chavez. The International Atomic Energy Agency and Iran have agreed to adopt a practical and pragmatic approach to resolve outstanding issues. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. We begin in Russia. The country announced a ceasefire to allow civilians to safely evacuate the towns of Mariupol and Volnovakha in the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine. The Ministry of Defense announced that as of 10 a.m. Moscow time, the Russian side declared ceasefire and opens humanitarian corridors for civilians to leave these two cities. The official military part details that the humanitarian corridors and routes were agreed with Ukraine. According to the Russian ministry, about 200,000 people intend to leave the city of Mariupol and another 20,000 want to leave Volnovakha. Some Ukrainian media reported that Kiev started the ceasefire at 11 a.m. local time. The leader of the Donbass People's Republic, Denis Pushilin, reported on Saturday that an explosion caused by Ukrainian nationalists from the Azov regiment in a building in Mariupol left 200 people trapped on the rubble. Pushilin stated that most civilians trapped were women and children, while saying that the humanitarian corridor opened to Russian President Vladimir Putin on Saturday said that any third-party declaration of a no-fly zone over Ukraine will be viewed by Moscow as a participation in the armed conflict.
We're hearing that a no-fly zone must be established over the territory of Ukraine. It is impossible to do so over the territory of Ukraine itself, some neighboring countries, but any move in this direction will be viewed by us as a participation in the armed conflict of whichever side host territory will pose a threat to our service members. That very second we will view them as participants of the military conflict, and it would not matter what members they are.
The Russian president also said Saturday that he has no plans to declare martial law in Russia.
Martial law in the country is declared in accordance with the law at the President's order, and it has to be approved by the Federation Council's decision in an instance of external aggression in defined areas of military activity. But we don't have that situation, and I hope we don't have one. There are several options: martial law, special emergency state, which is also declared at an order approved by the Federation Council in the case of a large-scale external threat, and another emergency state normally announced regionally. It could be announced for the whole country in the case of industrial and national disasters and so on. That's not happening either, thank God. We're not going to introduce any emergency states on the territory of the Russian Federation.
Despite the fact that Russia has been labeled by the whole European Union system as a dangerous enemy, this Friday the European Court of Human Rights has asked Moscow to take care of the protection of civilians during evacuations. The reports on Ukraine provided by the Western media and even by European institutions continue to be contradictory. Both Kiev and its partners and allies in the European Union and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization NATO insist that Russia has not been able to gain control of any area in Ukrainian territory. However, the highest court of the continent in the human rights asked Moscow and not Kiev to facilitate the evacuation of civilians, specifying that only the Ukrainians and allow the crossing of humanitarian missions deployed by the United Nations. The same court that is handling over the protection of migrants' lives to Russia accuses the Eurasian nation of massive human rights violations committed by its troops. Everything looks much more confusing, especially since Russia was suspended from the main bodies of Europe's Council, one of them, by the way, the human rights courts. And we'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. Venezuela commemorates this Saturday 9 years since the passing of Commander Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez Fria was born on July 27, 1954, in Sabaneta de Barinas. After entering the military academy, he came across the Bolivarian doctrine and the emancipatory thoughts of the homeland founders. Chavez created the Bolivarian revolutionary movement to with which he tried to take power on the 4th of February 1992 through a military uprising against neoliberalism. After his liberation, he was elected president of Venezuela in 1998, and since then he undertook a program of social transformations evidenced in all economic indicators and becoming the target of world power centers. Commander Chavez overcame several coup attempts, conspiracies, popular consultations, and political and media siege without losing the support of his people. He died in Caracas on March 5, 2013 at the age of 58 after fighting cancer. To honor him, different activities take place this Saturday in and outside of Venezuela. In Colombia, the campaign for the parliamentary elections to be held on March 14th advances. The coalition Pacto Histórico had its campaign closing on Friday in Bogotá. The closing ceremony of the campaign took place in the Journalist Park, where thousands of supporters of the historic pact gathered together with the presidential pre-candidate Gustavo Petro, who addressed the population with a call to take care of the vote to ensure the majority in Congress. Next Sunday 13, citizens will go to the polls to elect members of the Senate, the House of Representatives, and the 16th seats for victims of the armed conflict in December. Internal consultations will also be held inside the parties to elect their candidates for the presidential elections. The first round will occur on May 29th, and if a second round were necessary, it will be held on June 19th. This Saturday, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel welcomed the leader of the Canadian company Sherritt International Corp., Leon Bindel, who after his visit to the island seeks to increase the participation of his company, specialized in the mining and oil sector, for the economic development of the country. According to local media reports, both parties seek to deepen the company's participation in order to promote greater economic development of the island in mining, oil exploration, and energy generation, initiative which they hope to achieve despite the tightening of the U.S. blockade against the Caribbean nation. The president of the company ratified that the objective is to take full advantage of the production and expansion of nickel and cobalt. In Argentina, a bishop close to Pope Francis was sentenced to 4 years and 6 months in prison for the sexual abuse of 2 seminarians. His immediate arrest has been ordered. Bishop Oscar Sancheta, 57, was denounced in 2018 by 2 seminarians for acts that occurred several years earlier, according to the ruling of a court in the northeastern city of Oran. The immediate arrest of the priest was ordered. The bishop traveled from the Vatican to attend the hearings, where he was sentenced as author of the crime of simple, maintained, and aggravated sexual abuse since it was committed by a minister of religious worship, according to a statement from the judiciary of the province of Salta. Meanwhile, the court requested that the Sancheta be registered in the genetic data bank, where rapists are registered. In Bolivia, the strike called by Romulo Calvo, president of the Civic Committee of Santa Cruz, failed overwhelmingly, according to data registered by the Ministry of Public Works. 92% of the municipalities did not join the call. The Association of the Municipalities of Santa Cruz, AMDE Cruz, reported that 92% of the municipal governments work normally and only 8% comply with the measure. They also reported that 70% of public transport worked without interruption in the department. On the other hand, regularity in flights was confirmed, whereas absenteeism in the interdepartmental bus stations was only reported in the morning. The Cruceño Senator, William Torres, wondered who will take responsibility, while affirming that no one is being used by Calvo anymore. And in Mexico, another journalist was killed in the central state of Zacatecas, becoming the 7th kill in the country so far this year. State Governor David Monreal confirmed the killing of Juan Carlos Muñiz, who covered crime for the online news site Testigo Minero in Fresnillo. Alfredo Valadez, also a journalist, said Muñiz also drove a taxi in the city to make ends meet. Zacatecas State Prosecutor's Office opened an investigation and would follow protocol for cases that could be crimes against freedom of expression. Zacatecas is one of Mexico's most violent states. In January, the body of 8 men and 2 women were found crammed into a pickup truck left before dawn near a Christmas tree in the main plaza of the state. The state is the scene of a bloody struggle for control between the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels. The United States be able to continue expelling migrant families arrested at the Mexican border under the public health policy as decided by a federal appeals court. The only restriction will be that they could be expelled to countries where they are persecuted. Although doubts about the appeal persisted among 3 judges on the panel, who even considered that it seemed like a relic of an era without vaccines, they still decided in favor of the decision and against thousands of migrant families and non-accompanied children. This policy, also known as Title 42, was enacted by the administration of former President Donald Trump and continued by Biden administration to prevent individuals to seek refuge from persecution or torture. This is the court's response to the request made by President Joe Biden, who last December asked to evaluate the lawsuits submitted by the states of Missouri and Texas. It will be until April, the date on which the Supreme Court has set the legal arguments of the prepared lawsuit. Haitian Prime Minister Ariel Henry announced the arrival of a mission from the Caribbean community to help the authorities prepare for the upcoming elections and find the best ways to fight the high levels of insecurity that shake the nation. The Prime Minister said the CARICOM mission will meet with the country's defense forces, including the National Police and the Armed Forces, to help understand and solve the problem of insecurity in the nation. Insecurity in Haiti was widely discussed during its 33rd CARICOM Heads of State Summit and in the 4th meeting of this organization with the Central America Integration System. Haiti's premier asked fellow countries for help in combating insecurity marked, amongst others, by multiple kidnappings. And we have more stories coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome again to From the South. The International Atomic Energy Agency and Iran have agreed to adopt a practical and pragmatic approach to resolve outstanding issues. The United Nations Agency Chief, Rafael Grossi, said they, along with Iran, have a number of important matters that needed to be resolved. In order to do so, both parties decided to try a practical, pragmatic approach to overcome them, to revive the country's 2015 nuclear deal. The Atomic Energy Organization of Iran said the two sides had come to the conclusion that some documents which need to be exchanged between the IAEA and the Iranian organization should be exchanged by May 22nd. Grossi's visit to Tehran came after Britain, one of the parties to parallel talks on the deal in Vienna, indicated an agreement was close. The 2015 nuclear deal has been hanging by a thread since the United States' unilateral withdrawal in 2018 under then-President Donald Trump.
We came to a conclusion that some documents which need to be exchanged between the IAEA and the Iranian organization should be exchanged by Corda May 22nd.
So this is why it's important to have this understanding between us today, which is an understanding to work together, to work very intensely.
And during a first ever media appearance in Afghanistan, the Taliban acting Interior Minister Sirajuddin Haqqani said Saturday that the Taliban-led country vowed not to be a threat to the world. Haqqani, who has been designated as a terrorist by the United States, made his comments during a police graduation ceremony in Kabul. For the first time, video footage showing his face was broadcast by local television channels and news websites. This was a clear contrast compared with a previous public appearance in October, which he had his photo published blurred. The police graduation ceremony provided the first wave of new police graduates since the Taliban assumed control of Afghanistan. Haqqani is currently wanted by the FBI and carries a $10 million bounty for information leading to his arrest. And Friday's attacks against Shiite community mosque in Pakistan, as a few hours ago the terrorist group Daesh claimed responsibility for the brutal attack. The suicide attack against the mosque of the Shiite Muslim minority in Peshawar in the northwest of the country killed 57 people and left more than 200 wounded, some of them in serious condition, so the number of victims could increase. In a release published by the AMCAC agency linked to the terrorist organization, they vindicate the attack and claim that the number of victims is over 200. In the same document, the terrorists referred that the extremists identified as Ulaibi al-Kablib attacked the mosque this Friday and shot at least 2 people and minutes later blew himself up. The attack is one of the largest ever carried out against the Shiite Muslim community in Pakistan.
These were human beings and worshippers inside a mosque, and they were brutally killed at a time when they were busy praying to God. This is very sad. We had our security system at the mosque, but he, the suicide attacker, killed all 4 guards on duty at the main entrance, and after that he entered the mosque and blew himself up. According to the latest report, the death toll has reached 57. Some of the funerals are pending as their relatives are coming from US, England, and other parts of the country. So some funerals will be done tomorrow, and at the moment we've had 16 funerals.
According to the South Korean Armed Forces, North Korea has conducted a new launch of an unidentified missile aimed at the Sea of Japan. This will be the 9th missile test this year. According to reports in Seoul, Pyongyang has already conducted 7 tests of various weapons between January and February, including one to develop a reconnaissance satellite. South Korea claims that the escalation in testing stems from the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's order to bolster the country's military capability by 2022. North Korea has repeatedly stated that the nature of its military capability is one of self-defense in the face of hostile actions between what it described as its greatest enemy, the United States, and its closest ally, South Korea. In Mali, at least 27 military personnel were killed and some 70 terrorists were neutralized on Friday during an attack on a military base south of the country. Malian special forces repelled an attack by a group defined as jihadists. During the action, in addition to those killed, 33 troops were wounded. Security sources in Mali attributed responsibility for the attack to groups sympathetic to the Islamic State. The military camp of Mondoro, near the border with Burkina Faso, has been the scene of repeated attacks by these armed groups. And China has increased its annual defense budget by $230 billion, representing a 7.1% increase in military spending, up from 6.8% last year, in line with the advance of the country's economic recovery. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang, during his speech at the annual session of the National People's Assembly, recalled that the state is committed to strengthening the country's military and defense capabilities, and these budgets will help strengthen those capacities and accelerate the modernization of logistics, systems, and equipment, as well as advance necessary reforms, encourage technological innovation, and attract talent. The Premier reaffirmed that the Chinese People's Liberation Army will continue to stand by the goals set by the Communist Party while conducting its training exercises and applying firm and flexible countermeasures against any aggression or threat to sovereignty, interests, and national security. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.